At night, perhaps it was the strong influence of the alcohol that made me less gentle than usual. I roughly ripped open the lace nightgown of the woman beneath me, unshowered kisses all the way down from her collarbone to her neck. Moments later, the woman's lips were swollen and red, and her eyes were hazy with a dazed look. When the passion reached its peak, my lips lingered and landed beside her ear, and I whispered softly, "Fife, let's have a baby, hon. Mom and Dad are longing for a grandson, and I also want a child that belongs to us." Before I could finish my words, the hands that had been tightly wrapped around my neck suddenly frozen then loosened. "I'm not ready to have a baby yet," Mary said in a cold voice. 3 years had passed. Was she still not ready? Was it that she wasn't ready to have a baby in general? Or was she not ready to have a baby for me? Mary's response was like a bucket of cold water being poured over my head. Instantly extinguishing any desire, I had to continue what I was doing. I sat up and leaned against the headboard, lighting a cigarette. My heart sank little by little. Before this, I had been thinking about giving each other one last chance. She once said that if I wasn't happy, we could get a divorce. In the 3 years since our marriage, she had always treated herself as a single young girl, indulging herself without any scruples and never considering my feelings. In fact, I had never been overly persistent about any one thing. It was just that those countless trivial matters piled up one after another, leaving me with no hope for the future of our relationship. I remembered that one day 3 years ago, she suddenly relented and agreed to her parents' request to marry me. At that time, I was overjoyed because I had finally married the girl I had been yearning for so much. I knew that her heart was still with her first love, and she didn't like me as much as I wished. However, I had always firmly believed that one day she would see my love and the kindness I had shown her. Over the past 3 years, I had been trying my best to warm her cold heart, but in the end, all my efforts turned out to be in vain. It was time to end this relationship that I cherished like a precious treasure, but she regarded as worthless. "Let's get a divorce." I exhaled a smoke ring and sighed softly. Mary thought I was joking. She gave me a disdainful look, turned sideways in a fit of pique, and swiped open her phone, completely oblivious to my gloomy mood. Her indifferent and nonchalant attitude stabbed at my heart once again. In an instant, I seemed to understand that we were never going to make it to the end together. My one-sided infatuation should come to an end. Looking at the smoke swirling in front of me, I recalled what had happened at dinner. Tonight was my father-in-law James' birthday. We had originally planned to have a small celebration at a hotel. However, my father-in-law disagreed. Saying that we should just have a simple meal at home this year then? He answered a phone call, his smile fading as he asked me in a slightly annoyed voice. I paused with the goblet in my hand and stopped arranging the table settings. "Before getting off work today, Fife said she had something urgent and left early. She told me not to wait for her." I said. "She said she'd come back later by herself." "Call her right now. This is simply outrageous." My father-in-law interrupted me. He motioned for me to put down what I was doing and sit down, then turned to his wife, my mother-in-law Karen, and whispered chidingly, "Look how spoiled our daughter has become." I swiped open my phone, and the interface of the Moments page came into view. Seeing Mary's newly updated post on Moments, he instinctively clicked on it without hesitation, instead of calling her first. Time passes by in a flash, yet my heart remains as it was. After going around in circles, I find that it's still you. At the roadside, a girl leaned her head on a boy's shoulder, and their shadows were closely intertwined as they nestled together. The streetlight at night stretched their shadows far into the distance in an instant. A dull pain welled up in my heart. In front of me, Mary had never snuggled up to me like a delicate and clingy little woman. Except during our intimate moments, she had always been like a spoiled young lady, haughty and aloof in front of me, just like a proud peacock. Because I loved her, I had always assumed that was just her character, and never thought much more about it. Now, it seemed that I was the only one she treated differently. Can't you get through to Fei? Never mind, I'll call her. My father-in-law's voice interrupted my thoughts. In the end, we started eating without waiting for Mary. She didn't show up until we were almost done with the meal. Taryn frowned and scolded her daughter when she saw this. John has been busy preparing for your father's birthday since he got off work and you didn't even show up. Mom, I had something unexpected come up. Mary cooed as she hugged her parents from behind, kissed each of them on the cheek, and wished her father a happy birthday. She scanned the sumptuous dinner table and then looked at me. You've worked hard, John. Although Mary expressed her gratitude to me, I could see nothing but perfunctoriness in her eyes, without a single trace of sincerity. It's what I should do, I said, retracting my gaze and nodding to my father-in-law and mother-in-law. After the meal, the maid set the cake on the table. Then we were about to insert the candles. My wish is to have a grandson as soon as possible, my father-in-law said, his eyes fixed intently on his daughter. So, this was the important thing my father-in-law had been talking about. He stood up, patted me on the shoulder, and his voice softened significantly. I won't have any of the cake, you guys enjoy it. I knew how kind the two elders were to me. They had been doing their best to maintain our unbalanced marriage. However, not all efforts can lead to success. Take our relationship. For example, feelings can't always be forced. It was probably for the best everything was still within reach, and fortunately we didn't have children yet. So, there were no more complicated ties between us. A few days later, I handed the divorce agreement to Mary while she was doing her makeup. This is the divorce agreement. Knit when you have the time, I said. Mary didn't respond or take it. She gave me a scornful glance, as if suspecting that the divorce agreement was not genuine at all. I let out a self-deprecating chuckle. You always said I wasn't manly enough. Well, today I lacked like a real man and fulfill your wish of all these years. Are you serious about this? Harry held the eyebrow pencil in her hand and continued to delicately trace her already very delicate eyebrows without the slightest pause. Just take a look and you'll know for sure. I said I had other things to attend to and then got up and left home. I knew that Mary had always been blaming me in her heart. She resented my existence, resented that I was too outstanding, both in terms of my appearance and my inner abilities. She resented that I had won too much favor from her parents, so much so that Robert didn't stand a chance in their eyes at all. Come to think of it, if their relationship had been deep enough, no one could have torn them apart. If Robert hadn't run away first, Mary wouldn't have chosen to marry me a year later. At that time, I naively thought that my silent waiting had finally touched her. Now, it seemed that I was just her compromise. In the divorce agreement, I asked for very little in terms of property division. If it hadn't been for the two elders insisting on transferring a two-bedroom apartment to my name, I would have only asked for an amount of money. Compared to the company shares they had given me initially, it was just a tiny fraction. I would always keep in mind the kindness the two elders had shown me throughout my life. In fact, when I told them that I was going to divorce Mary, I felt uneasy and even a bit guilty inside. To my surprise, neither of them said anything to make things difficult for me. Instead, they comforted me. Perhaps they knew their daughter better than anyone else. Suddenly, I recalled what had happened when I was 18 years old. On my father's way home from work, there was a sudden heavy rainstorm, and a car fell into the river by the roadside. My father, who had been good at swimming since he was a child, didn't hesitate to jump into the river to save the people. He managed to save Mary and her parents one after another, but in the end, my father drowned due to exhaustion. I remembered the police telling me that my father had brought James to a point just 2 meters away from the shore before he slowly sank into the water. James was later rescued by the people who arrived at the scene. My father's body wasn't retrieved until 2 days later. My mother was so heartbroken that her heart disease flared up after spending all the compensation money that the government had awarded our family. She also passed away. That year, I was taking the college entrance examination, shaken by such a huge blow. Despite my good academic performance before, I didn't do as well as I can have in the exam. At that time, I even secretly harbored hatred towards June's family. Later, James helped me find a good school for repeating the senior year. I stubbornly refused to go. It was my grandmother who scolded me, even hit me, and finally pleaded with me through her heirs that I reluctantly went back to school to repeat the year. A year later, I was admitted to a good university. Half the expenses during that period, including my grandmother's living expenses in her hometown, were silently transferred to my cart by James. Gradually, I emerged from my grief and became more mature in my thinking. I believed that if my father were watching over me from heaven, he wouldn't want me to live my life filled with resentment. So, I gradually accepted the kindness of their family. Since my internship, I had naturally joined the Sioux family's enterprise. Mary truly stole my heart during my internships. He was 2 years older than me, and James asked her to show me around and help me get familiar with everything in the company. She taught me how to manage operations effectively, including business communication skills, project management techniques, and marketing awareness. These were things that I later had to study further on my own, as my major was actually graphic design. She was beautiful and had a cheerful smile. Unlike some girls who were overly sensitive and difficult to please, she was generous and graceful, just like an elder sister to me. She always insisted that I call her Sister Fife, but I never did. You're only 1.65 meters tall, and I'm 1.85 meters. I'm a full 20 centimeters taller than you. Do you really think I can call you that without feeling a bit awkward? I taunted her on purpose. Go ahead and call me. If you dare to call, I dare to answer, she challenged. No way you. Daydreaming, I retorted. Hey, we got along really well and often had fun joking around and playfully teasing each other. Later, the two elders noticed my feelings for Mary and had their own plans. They deliberately tried to match us up. That was when I realized that Mary had been waiting for her first love all along. She said that she had always regarded me as a younger brother. She rejected her parents' suggestion, and from then on, she began to keep a deliberate distance from me. After that, I silently stayed by her side, never crossing the line. One day, 2 years later, after I got extremely drunk from taking her place and drinking once again, she, who was also quite tipsy, suddenly asked me, "Do you still want to marry me?" Of course. I clearly remembered that my answer was extremely firm. However, after we got married, she was sometimes cold and sometimes warm towards me, sometimes close and sometimes distant. I couldn't figure her out. I thought that as long as I gave her enough time, things would eventually get better. Now, it seemed that my expectation had failed. I planned to go back to my hometown county to find my grandmother, after getting the divorce certificate and finishing the work handover. On the 5th day after moving out of the Sioux family's house, during my lunch break, I received a message from Mary on my phone. John, are you really sure you want to get a divorce? It was ridiculous. 5 days had passed, and she was only thinking about the divorce now? After reading the message, I didn't reply. I thought that the divorce agreement was enough to demonstrate my determination. When I got off work and walked to the parking lot that night, I saw Mary waiting there. I gave her a distant look and then averted my gaze. I opened the driver's door and got in directly. The door of the passenger seat on the other side was immediately opened. I glanced at Mary out of the corner of my eye. After a moment, I spoke first. "Have you signed the agreement?" I asked in an indifferent tone. "Are you really serious about this?" Mary's beautiful eyes were fixed on me intently, as if she was trying to see through my innermost thoughts. Perhaps at this moment, she still couldn't believe that I who had been so devoted and tolerant to her for 3 years, would take the initiative to bring up the topic of divorce. Of course you should know me well enough, after all these years of being together, I said. I'm the kind of person who doesn't say things casually once I make a decision. It's well thought out and not easily changed, just because I said I wasn't ready to have a baby. Sort of, I replied. I didn't want her to keep bombarding me with questions, so I just went along with her words. I knew that there is no point in seeing any more. Perhaps Mary didn't expect me to admit it so straightforwardly. She was momentarily at a loss for words, choked by my response. And in a fit of anger, she said with a stiff neck, "You have some guts, remember what you said today." With that, she slammed the door and left. I sat there for a long time, looking at her proud and upright back. I had once thought that she, with her youthful charm and ready smile, would be the eternal light in my life now. I realized I was wrong. I didn't hate her, it was just that my once passionate love had gradually faded away, leaving behind nothing but disappointment. In the following days, I wasn't sure if Mary was deliberately trying to provoke me. Her moments was filled with posts about her reunion with her first love, Robert, but I simply ignored them. I thought this was exactly what she had been longing for. She must have been very happy to finally be with the person who had been hidden in her heart for so many years. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I was taken by surprise when the bar called me. I initially thought it was a scam call. Not wanting to worry the two elders, I still went to the bar and brought Mary home. When I finally helped her onto the guest room bed and was about to leave, she clung tightly to my arm. "John, there's really nothing between me and Robert. Please come back. Can't we just go back to the way we were?" she pleaded. "I never wanted to divorce you, did, and you say you would always be good to me. You're drunk, just get some rest," I said with a frown, feeling helpless. I was thinking about how difficult it was to deal with drunk people and what I should do. When I looked back, she had already fallen asleep. Suddenly, I remembered what the bar waiter had told me earlier. Mary had gone to the bar with a man at first, but shortly after, the man received a phone call and left on his own. After that, Mary drank a lot by herself. The waiter said that Mary had given them my phone number. Why didn't she ask the waiter to call Robert? And why did Robert leave her alone like that? A cooling-off period passed by quickly. I sent Mary a message saying that we should meet at the Civil Affairs Bureau. In the parking lot in front of the company building, I witnessed such a scene. By a row of cars, a man and a woman seemed to be arguing out of curiosity. I took a few more glances. The woman had a noticeably large belly, and the man was none other than Robert. I came to a halt and stood beside my car. The woman said, "Robert, how long are you going to keep avoiding me? Have you even thought about the child in my belly? I forgave you for what happened with that woman outside before. Why are you still hiding from me? What do you mean by finding a new woman now? Haven't you given any thought to our future at all?" A man replied, "Let's get a divorce. I already brought it up with you the other day, but you were the one who didn't agree. Abort the baby and don't come looking for me again in the future." Here's some background information. It turned out that on the day at the bar, he was suddenly called back by his wife, and he had also proposed divorce to her. "You bastard! You're such a scumbag!" The woman angrily slapped the man and then kept punching him with both hands. In the end, I watched as the woman left crying. The anger that I had suppressed flared up again instantly. I clenched my fists and strode up to Robert in 2 or 3 steps and punched him right in the face. Caught off guard, he was stunned and covered his face with his hands. "You son of a bitch, you haven't sorted out your own mess yet, and you're here bothering Fife, eh? I'll beat you to a pulp." As I cursed, I landed another powerful punch on Robert's chin with my other hand. Then, I heard a shrill scream from a woman. "Jane, what's wrong with you? Since when have you become so unreasonable?" It was Mary. She pushed me hard and slapped me across the face. I stood there, stunned, staring intently at the woman who had slept beside me for 3 years. My heart ached with a sharp, stabbing pain. I watched coldly as she nervously examined the injuries on Robert's face. After a long while, I let out a sigh and said, "See you at the Civil Affairs Bureau later." An hour later, Mary showed up at the Civil Affairs Bureau as promised. And we completed the divorce procedures smoothly. There was still a hint of anger on her face. In fact, we didn't have a single argument during the divorce process. It could be considered a peaceful breakup. When we were about to leave, I had originally wanted to say, "Take care," to her in the end. I didn't say anything. After finishing the work handover, I said goodbye to James and Karen. After packing everything up, I headed to the small county town where my grandmother lived. My grandmother had been living alone in the small county town of our hometown for the past few years. Previously, I had proposed several times to have her come and live with us in City A. She always refused. James and Karen also, every time they accompanied me to visit her in the county town, would suggest taking her with us. She always said that she was used to living in her small county town, where she had familiar neighbors and friends, and she didn't want to leave. This time, I finally had the opportunity to keep her company. Maybe I would also come to like this place. My arrival made my grandmother both happy and sad. She was happy that I would be by her side from then on, but sad that I had gotten divorced and could no longer develop as well as I did in the big city. I comforted my grandmother, saying that I was sure I could also make a good life in the small county town. About a month after I returned to the small county town of my hometown, I received a phone call from James. He said that there were some problems with the company's tax accounts, and the tax bureau had approached them several times. She asked if I could spare some time to go back and help out, because after I married Mary, he had gradually entrusted the affairs of his company to me. In fact, not long after I returned to my hometown, I began to set up my own small advertising company. This was a small business opportunity I had discovered while working in the Sioux family enterprise, and it was also related to my major. At that time, I had just found a studio, and some initial matters hadn't been fully sorted out yet, so I could still manage to go back. And I agreed to James's request. Harren had someone clean the house thoroughly for me in advance the day after I arrived in City A. I threw myself into the work. Since I had been away from the company for quite a while, I had to ask Mary to cooperate with me at work. When I saw her again, I noticed that she had lost a lot of weight. During the working hours, I didn't allow myself to be idle. I wanted to finish the work here as soon as possible so that I could go back and work on my own studio, and Mary seemed to have a lot of free time. From time to time, our eyes would meet at such moments. She would look a bit flustered. This was something that had never happened before. I felt that she no longer seemed to be as carefree as she used to be. However, all of this had nothing to do with me anymore apart from work. I deliberately avoided any opportunity to be alone with her. On the first weekend after I returned to City A, James invited me to have dinner at home again, and it seemed that I couldn't decline any longer. Since it was the weekend, and the work I had come back for was also nearing completion, I told James that I would invite the superior leaders to have a meal in a couple of days, and then this matter would be successfully resolved. At the dinner table, James thanked me politely and gave me quite a lot of alcohol. After that, they asked me to stay in the guest room of the villa, but I refused. So they asked Mary to drive me back to East Street, and I couldn't say anything more. When we arrived at the residential area and I got out of the car, Mary tried to support me several times, but I subtly avoided her. Seeing the look of disappointment in her eyes, my heart still ached faintly. I forced myself not to look at her, fearing that the emotional wall I had built up would collapse at that moment. I was even more afraid that I would fall in again and get hurt even deeper. When we reached the door of my house, I said again, "It's getting late. You can go back. I'll be fine on my own." "John, can't you even invite me in to sit for a while?" Mary rarely lowered her Raiden pleaded in a low voice. Hi. It was ridiculous. I still couldn't refuse her. As soon as the anti-theft door of the house closed, Mary hugged me from the side. My body stiffened, and the long-lost scent that had once fascinated me filled my nostrils. John, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Mary's voice, tinged with sobs, came out softly. Not long after I returned to my hometown, I noticed that Mary had deleted all the bits and pieces about Robert from her moments, leaving no trace at all. I knew that they must have separated. Was she apologizing for the slap she had given me? After standing there in a daze for a few seconds, I gently pried her slender hands off my waist. I suddenly felt a bit cruel. If it had been before, seeing her so sad would have made me feel so. Once I had loved her so carefully that, in the eyes of others, my love seemed humble. Now that I had finally let go of this love to a large extent, I didn't want to fall into it again. You don't need to apologize to me. I've never blamed you. Nor do I hate you. Perhaps the fate between us is just this shallow. I forced myself to stay calm and spoke in an indifferent tone. No, just scold me, and we can go back to the way we were before, okay? Mary's eyes were red. At that moment, I really wanted to embrace her in my arms again. Come to your senses, we can't go back to the way we were, I said firmly. Pretending to be resolute, Mary, who was as proud as a princess, finally held back her ears with great effort and left angrily, slamming the door behind her. 2 days later, we invited the superior leaders to have a meal, and both Mary and I drank a lot of alcohol. I called a designated driver. She hadn't spoken to me for 2 days, but in the car on the way back, she babbled nonsense to me all the way. She said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lost you. Ooh. She said that she would never drink a toast with anyone else again. She said that she wanted to have a child for me, whether it was a boy or a girl. I leaned my head back on the rear seat, my thoughts in a mess, feeling helpless. Some relationships, once there are cracks, can never go back to the way they were. Cherish the encounters and face the partings with a smile. Speaking of which, when Robert graduated, he found that he couldn't find a suitable job anywhere. He was too proud to take a low-level job, but not qualified for high-level ones. And Mary's parents didn't think highly of him either. At that time, his aunt from his hometown Cobbin said she would introduce the girl to him. The girl's father was a minor official in the county town. She said that if he was willing, she could arrange a decent and stable job for him. He agreed without hesitation and left Mary without saying a word. Later, he married the girl, but less than 2 years after the marriage, he had an affair. When the girl's father found out, somehow it became known to everyone, and he couldn't stay in his unit anymore and was forced to resign. The two of them started to file for divorce. But before the divorce was finalized, they found out that the woman was pregnant. The divorce matter was put on hold. Later, out of helplessness, because of the pregnancy, the woman planned to forgive Robert and give him another chance. At this time, Robert accidentally got back in touch with Mary. He then played the disappearing act and spent all day thinking about being with his first love. Such a scumbag's tricks were bound to end badly. Now Robert's wife has aborted the 4 or 5-month-old fetus and directly kicked him out of the house with nothing. Mary has also cut off all contact with her. All of this was privately told to me by James that day. He also subtly hinted to me that he hoped I could give my relationship with Mary another try. I could only change the subject. My firm attitude made him understand that it was no longer possible for Mary and me. In fact, I once thought that if I let go of this relationship, I would surely feel like my life was not worth living. It has been proven that when love dies in the heart, there will be a rebirth. After returning to this small county town of my hometown, I stayed in my studio all day long. I was often busy from morning till night. One day, my grandmother actually got lost on her way to bring me lunch. I found out only when a girl called me. I immediately took a taxi there. When I arrived, I realized that the girl was the daughter of our neighbor upstairs. My grandmother smiled at me and said, "John, this is Ying Ying, the daughter of Aunt Lee upstairs." She didn't look panicked at all, as if she hadn't gotten lost. In fact, my grandmother had never brought me lunch before. She said that she had bought very fresh beef ribs at the market that day and wanted to bring me some after stewing them, so that I could eat them while they were still hot. "Thank you so much. Thank goodness you called me." I thanked the girl sincerely. "You're welcome. I just happened to be here tutoring students and came across her." The girl smiled shyly. My grandmother took the girl's hand and squinted her eyes. "Ying, Ying, Ying. This is my dear grandson, John." Okay. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, but the girl's face turned a bit red. "Grandma, I'm not a 3-year-old kid anymore. Stop calling me your dear grandson." They both smiled at each other, as if to ease the awkward atmosphere. Then we said goodbye to each other. My grandmother and I went home together. Since it was the weekend anyway, I treated it as a rest day. In the car on the way back, my grandmother chattered on and on about the girl Ying Ying all the way. Her original name was Jennifer. She was 8 years old and was an elementary school teacher. Her father had passed away due to illness 2 years ago, and her mother was also an elementary school teacher. Because my grandmother had been living alone at home for all these years, and they were also a single mother and daughter, they often visited each other. Since I started kindergarten, my parents had taken me with them. My grandmother had been an old neighbor of theirs for decades, so they got along very well. My grandmother asked me what I thought of Jennifer. I knew what she meant and immediately stopped her from saying anything more inappropriate. "Grandma, she's still a young girl. How can I? The divorced man mess with her?" I repeatedly told her not to mention it again in the future. Seeing my serious expression, she didn't say anything more, but her eyes were full of regret. I held her hands affectionately and promised her that if I met a suitable girl, I would try to get along with her. It had been almost 2 months since I left City A. It was my grandmother's birthday that day. I had originally planned to take her out for a stroll and then take her to a hot pot, but she said that in previous years, they had eaten out, and this year, it would be better to cook at home. She also said that it would be more lively with more people, and she had invited Aunt Lee, our neighbor, and her daughter to come for lunch. So she asked me to buy more groceries. Since it was the old lady's birthday, I could only do as she said. I went to buy a lot of groceries early in the morning and came back. I took all the vegetables, seafood, and meat to the kitchen and piled them all over the floor, then started to get busy. When my grandmother saw this, she rolled up her sleeves and was about to go into the kitchen to help. I directly pushed her out and said, "You're the birthday star today. Just sit back, watch some TV, and wait for the delicious food." My grandmother smiled so that all her wrinkles piled up, and she seemed a bit embarrassed. "What birthday star? It's just like any other day. Just listen to me. Go out and wait on tea. You trust your grandson." Since my grandmother couldn't argue with me, she reluctantly went to the living room to watch TV. I knew that she did not trust me. She just wanted to help. Because my father was also an excellent cook, when he was alive when I was a child, he would always ask me to help him in the kitchen whenever he cooked. So I had known how to cook a lot of delicious dishes from an early age. I suddenly thought of the 3 years I had spent with Mary. Although there was a maid to cook at home, whenever I had time, I would cook 1 or 2 of her favorite dishes for her. Every time, I would look forward to her tasting the dishes I had prepared with care and feeling satisfied and happy. However, most of the time, she would just give a perfunctory compliment, or say it was just so. Perhaps for someone who doesn't love you, no matter what you do for them, it may not be noticed. Ding dong. The ringing of the doorbell in the house brought me back to my senses. Before I could go to open the door, my grandmother said excitedly, I'll go. I'll open the door." Then there were sounds of laughter and chatting in the living room. I poked my head out and saw that it was Aunt Lee upstairs and her daughter. I checked the time. It was only 10:15. I greeted them and continued to be busy in the kitchen. Not long after, Aunt Lee came into the kitchen and started helping to pick the vegetables. John, you bought so many groceries. And Aunt Lee, you should eat more later. I asked her to go out and chat with my grandmother, but she said that Ying Ying was keeping her company. She mentioned what I looked like before I was 3 years old. She said that she had just gotten married at that time and lamented how time flies. Ding dong. The doorbell rang again. I was wondering who it could be. Auntie, happy birthday. It was the voices of James and Taryn. Happy birthday, Grandma. It was Mary. Dad, you guys, you're here? I subconsciously blurted out. But the words got stuck in my throat later. James, Karen, and Mary, the whole family of 3, had come. They were carrying big and small bags of things. In previous years, on my grandmother's birthday, we would also come back together to celebrate it for her. I just didn't expect that even though I had already divorced Mary, they would still come to celebrate Grandma's birthday with us. Later, the situation became a bit, how should I put it? Let's just say, it was a bit chaotic. And Lee asked me to go out and entertain the guests. Jennifer felt a bit awkward sitting in the living room, so she went into the kitchen to help out. I exchanged some polite words with them for a while, and then I went to the marinated food store in the seafood market to buy some more dishes. When I came back, Aunt Lee had already cooked most of the dishes. Finally, I went in to help with the finishing touches. After a full table of dishes was set, Aunt Lee looked a bit embarrassed and said, "Oh, you guys can have the meal we back first." How could that be possible? It didn't make sense that the people who had been busy for half a day wouldn't even have a meal and just leave during the meal. I sat on Grandma's left side, and Grandma asked Jennifer to sit on her right side. Throughout the meal, Grandma kept putting food on Jennifer's plate. It made everyone at the table feel a bit embarrassed, and the atmosphere was awkward for a while. Only Grandma was smiling happily and enjoying it. After the meal, Karen probably noticed that Mary looked a bit unhappy and her face was rather gloomy, so she suggested going back to City early, saying that it wasn't safe to go back too late. I accompanied them downstairs. Before they left, Mary's saddened, resentful gaze was obvious. However, I could only pretend not to see it. I waved goodbye to them. After that, I blamed Grandma for constantly putting food on Jennifer's plate, which made everyone feel a bit awkward. She replied to me that since Jennifer had come and been busy all morning, she should eat more. I said that wasn't what I meant. Finally, Grandma admitted that she had deliberately done it to provoke Mary. She said, "What a great grandson I have, but she didn't know how to cherish you." I told her that she shouldn't use Jennifer as a means to an end. But she said that she really liked Ying Ying and thought she was very sensible. She said that when she was alone in her hometown, whenever Aunt Lee's family bought something and happened to meet her, they would give her some. Sometimes when Grandma refused to accept it, Jennifer would say that there was a special offer at the supermarket and that if they couldn't finish it, it would be a waste. For Emma said that these were just small favors and that she could afford to buy them herself. What touched her was that they had the thoughtfulness. Well, what else could I say? Over the past 2 months, my studio has also gotten on the right track, and I have started to receive quite a few orders one after another. I plan to hire a college graduate boy to help me when the time is right. One afternoon, I was busy and suddenly looked up to see Mary's face. I thought I was dreaming. After being stunned for a few seconds, I finally came to my senses. "What's wrong? You don't recognize me after just a few days?" Mary said in a sarcastic tone. "No, I just didn't expect that I would come all the way here to find you." Mary laughed self-deprecating lie. "Actually, I didn't expect it myself. I think I'm probably crazy." Wes said that the store was in a mess and suggested going to a coffee shop to sit down. She said there was no need. So we sat down at a small square table in the corner of the store. I gave her a bottle of water. She took it, opened it, took a sip, and remained silent for a long time. Finally, she was the first to speak. "John, is it really impossible for us to get back together?" I've been thinking a lot these days. You always really wanted a child that belonged to us. Now I finally understand what a child means. Now I really regret it. I keep thinking that if we had a child, would we not have ended up like this today? To be honest, I was quite surprised by what Mary said, and I didn't know how to answer her. The carefree and straightforward young lady, who used to be heartless, now could actually reflect on herself. John, I'm 2 years older than you, but I think you're much more mature than me in your thinking. I used to be so stubborn that I thought I would never love anyone except my first love. So, when I found out that Robert had married someone else, I rashly married you. After we got married, I kept acting up. You tolerated me time and time again. Now that we're divorced, I realize how wrong I was. Mary kept talking on her own and suddenly burst into tears. I didn't know how to comfort her. I could only wait quietly for her to pour out what was in her heart. Oh. Stop crying. It doesn't make any sense to say these things now. Consider it my fault. I couldn't hold on, I said as I handed her a tissue, feeling nothing inside. No, it's my fault. Mary choked up again and couldn't speak after a long while. Shh. Calm down a bit. John, I'll give you enough time. Looking at Mary's forced smile as she dried her ears, I was at a loss for words. She left. She said she would come to see me again when she was free another day. I thought that Mary saying she would come to find me again when she was free was just her being unwilling to accept the situation at that moment in just empty words. Unexpectedly, on the following weekends and holidays, she would occasionally come to my grandma's house. Every time she came, she would help my grandma with some small household chores. Sometimes when she saw me, she would look especially reserved. Seeing her being so cautious and a bit humble reminded me of myself in the past. I felt mixed emotions in my heart. Once she said rather subtly that her parents hoped we could remarry. I directly told her not to waste any more time on me. Her eyes instantly turned red and she said, "Is it because of that girl?" I didn't answer. I didn't think it was entirely because of that. Is a woman's sixth sense really that strong? Mary guessed all the possibilities between me and Ying Ying. Half a year later, Ying Ying and I confirmed our relationship as boyfriend and girlfriend. Mary came to see me a few more times later. The last time, I introduced Ying Ying to her generously, and I said to Ying Ying, "This is Sister Feifei." That day, I accompanied her downstairs. Suddenly she smiled. I asked her what she was laughing at. She said that on Grandma's birthday, when she saw Jennifer, she realized that she might really lose me forever. She said she saw the shyness in Jennifer's eyes and that this was the kind of expression a woman would show in front of the boy she liked. She said she really wished that time could be turned back, and then she choked up again. After that, Mary never came to see me again. Actually, at first, I didn't pay much attention to Jennifer. First of all, after all, I had been divorced. And as a young girl, she had enough advantages to choose someone better. Secondly, I had some misunderstandings about quiet and cute girl next door types. I always thought that such girls were melodramatic, prone to crying, and needed to be coaxed and given a sense of security all the time. In fact, that wasn't the case. Jennifer might seem gentle and delicate on the outside, but she was quite independent on the inside. For a long time, she had been silently being kind to me. It reminded me of myself in the past. I admit that at the beginning, I agreed to Grandma's suggestion to try to date her out of gratitude. As we got along and I got to know her better, I discovered her goodness. The original gratitude turned into affection. When I finally saw clearly what was in my heart and confirmed that I had fallen in love with her, I realized that some people were just passers-by in my life, and the true salvation that belonged to me was waiting for me not far away. Perhaps it's only when you reach a certain age that you understand that some things and some people can't be forced. What you think is the end is actually just another starting point. Fate has its own arrangements. Let everything go with the flow. Don't heed well on the past, and don't be afraid of the future.